Welcome to HQLA episode 33. So I'm going to be talking about businesses that do need to make money, businesses that don't need to make money, and how you can reverse the aging process, whether you are or aren't making money. We're also going to be going back to the blockchain, I believe, but that's on Nathan. So
Really something for everyone.
Nathan,
I love it.
I'm selling his segment as well, so that'll be good.
Since when do I get my segment sold in these intros? This is a new thing.
Well, sometimes. So Nathan, have you ever seen Keeping Up with the Kardashians?
No.
Okay, so I actually have a top 3 favorite parts from that show, and this isn't the segment, but I have a top 3 favorite parts. So there's this character Scott, and there's this part where he walks around with a cane, and everyone who's like
Wait, so you watched
a bit of a
this show?
fashionista on. I've never seen it. No, he's walking. I've seen like little clips.
Oh yes, just for research.
There's like 55 seasons of it. And these are basically the 3 parts that I've seen, and I think it's because they're the parts that are circled around.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this character Scott. He walks around with a cane in one part, and he's just like a really good character. You know, he's definitely my favorite character in the show. And by character, I mean it's a reality show, so he's a real person too, I guess. There is one of them. I think it's Kendall Jenner. She's trying to cut a cucumber, but she's cutting it like backwards, like she's never cut a cucumber.
That is
before.
a thing. Yep,
it's like
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
That's in an ad now.
Yeah, there you go.
Have you seen the ad?
There you go. Yeah, it's I think they redid it for the ad.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's an Uber.
I get that.
Uber Eats ad, I think.
Yes, Uber Eats. Yeah, that's right.
Because they're like, oh, why don't we just order a salad? You know.
Her mum's just ordering stuff constantly on the Uber Eats ad. The last one I saw anyway, and she's cutting a cucumber. I think. Yeah. If people are still listening to this episode, it's a miracle.
No, this is good. Everyone loves the Kardashians. And one of the parts was one of them loses a really expensive earring in the Maldives on one of those resorts where they're all on like a bunch of jetties with the huts on them, you know, Yeah. And so I think that it goes down into the ocean below.
We need to do a podcast on one of those huts, I think.
I mean, that would be very cool. It'll be totally a business expense. So we'll get away with that. But did you know that Kim Kardashian has co-founded a private equity firm?
Yeah. So, I feel like I did know something. Is it very recently?
It was about 6 months ago that she founded it, or over 6 months.
I'm aware of it.
The firm is called Skky Partners. So that's SKKY. And Kim is the co-managing partner with Jay Sammons, who is previously experienced in PE. So it's a consumer products and media private equity firm, and they're currently raising for their first fund. So the fund will be $1 billion, which is raised from investors. They're targeting 10 to 12 investments that they're going to do with a target acquisition price of 100 million to 500 million each. So that'll be pretty big acquisitions in the media and consumer product space.
Does it sound like they're just going to like buy up content creators? Is that the take?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I would say content creators would be a lot smaller than that range. So I would say it would be media companies.
Content creators plus someone who has a bunch of products. I don't know. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, maybe. Well, if they're $100 million acquisitions at minimum, I would say the play is more of those things that are on TV that could be expanded to digital media, could be a YouTube show, could be, you know, more online. So I would say there's a huge move for some of those TV channels to be online and some of those YouTubers to be on TV. So there'd be a lot of kind of crossover work that can be done there to like crossover, I guess, different platforms to make sure that like people are trying to kind of get multiple streams of income from the same kind of creator. So that would be cool.
Yeah.
So they're asking for a commitment of 10 million from each of their limited partners, LPs. And so they'll be bringing them on board. So that'll be about 100 investors that they're bringing on board. You know, one thing I think a lot of people would be wondering is how does a fund typically structure? And what kind of is the setup like? So how it usually works is there's a 2% management fee that the GP or general partner will make from the from the actual fund before any profits get distributed to the LPs. So they'll make that 2% management fee right off the bat. And that's just for running the fund.
As in 2% of what?
So in this case, they're running a $1 billion fund. That would be 20 million a year, just for running.
So 2% of funds invested, is that sort of what you would say?
Yeah, 2% of the fund size.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that'd be 20 mil for running the fund, all the overhead, salaries, and other expenses. Then this fund has a hurdle rate of 8% compounded annually.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is Skky Partners needs to achieve a return of 8% before earning carried interest, or carry, right? Basically what carry is where they need to return over 8% of the fund. And then for all of the returns over that 8% hurdle rate, the PE will actually take 20% of that additional return and leave 80% for the investors. So that's their carry. So overall, I think it's a really cool idea. PE firms generally exist to make money in ways that can't really be made with the typical investments. So you get to own this large portion or even a majority or a full company. And then you get to make key structural changes, which is either holding or selling the company, partitioning it up into much smaller pieces, combining it with another company, making operational changes, stuff like that. And it's actually a lot better than if you were just buying it like a stock, for example. So if you think about what you get in a public market, you're only really getting a very small piece of it. Whereas this, you're kind of buying it off a private market. You're buying it at a way lower valuation. And it's especially true that you can kind of make a really good return if you think about it as you're buying at a price to earnings ratio of, say, 2 to 3, and then you can sell it at 4 to 6. You're instantly doubling the valuation there. So,
and I assume they're almost always like purchasing a controlling stake in whatever they're acquiring too, right? They're getting a board seat.
Yeah.
They're like, that's also such a big difference. Like you buy public market, like you're just sitting there going along for the ride, hoping things go well. But yeah, PE is right. You can actually go in and do stuff. It's like buying an investment property and then actually doing it up yourself, not just relying on the market to go up.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, basically they can buy at a low valuation. They can make a few tweaks. They can change the price. They can, mark up that valuation and then try and double their valuation.
The combining concept is good too. Like if, for example, they did do content creators, which as you say, maybe it's not the case because they're probably a little small, but even if it's products or something, like being able to like scale, being able to, I don't know, even like there's 3 companies, they all use 3 different like warehouses, just use one warehouse and save so much money. Like I guess it's stuff like that, the simple things as well.
There's plays like that, and then there's the opposite way. So there's like, for example, Universal taking Universal Music Group out of that and separating Universal, the film studio from the music, because that's where like the sum of its parts are worth more. And then there's other ones where it's like, the company is worth more than the sum of its parts. So there's 2 ways that you can kind of look at it, and it's all about how well you can sell it, I guess.
Totally.
So speaking of Universal Music Group, this is my next piece of news topic. So Universal Music Group is something we've talked about a few times on the show, which is pretty cool. So they've just partnered with Endel, which is a generative music app that lets people make personalized soundscapes for themselves. So it looks like they've partnered with this company as an AI play, which is really interesting. So Endel is an AI generative company, and they've got James Blake on as an artist, which is cool.
Back from the dead.
Back from the dead.
Haven't heard much from him for a while.
True. Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's got that soothing voice though, So they've made this play because they've been making these public statements about the erosive power of generative AI on the current music industry. So, and its ability to violate copyright, and they're afraid of this effect, basically. So if you go back to episode 16, where we talked about Bill Ackman doing a SPAC.
Yes.
That was to acquire.
That's right.
Universal Music Group.
What was the name of the SPAC? Do you remember? Did you write down?
There you go. So the name of the SPAC, here I'll do a little guessing game. The name of the SPAC was PSTH. Do you remember what that stands for?
Yes, it was like Persian Square something Holdings. Persian Square.
Ooh.
I can't remember what the T was.
Okay, so that's Pershing Square Tontine Holdings.
That's right. I was never going to get Tontine. That's right.
And I'm going to bring that up later in the episode.
Oh, okay. So it comes back. See if I can. We also
talked about them recently on an episode 31, where we were talking about how they were removing the AI generated songs from that guy that the guy made with the AI clone of The Weeknd and Drake. So listen to 16 and 31 if you're a massive fan of Universal Music Group.
Listen to them again, because I'm sure you've already listened to them.
Yeah. Again. Yeah. For the new fans,
Are you struggling to get your name out there? Do you want to attract more customers? Maybe just increase your revenue? Well, look no further than Newnique. They're an all-in-one marketing agency, and they'll help take your business to the next level. They believe in marketing that should be both effective and enjoyable, and I tend to agree. So they offer a range of services such as web design, branding, social media management, and lead generation. The team of experts, they'll work with you to develop a tailored marketing strategy that fits the unique needs of your business. And they don't just stop at making you look good, but they're specialized in setting up lead generating machines. Their top secret methods will help you capture and convert your leads, leading to increased sales and revenue for your unique business. So search NEW NIQ UE on Google to learn more and schedule a free marketing consultation via their website. So let Newnique take your business to the next level.
Index is a tech-focused recruitment platform passionate about scaling your engineering team, maintaining 95% placement success. To date, they've vetted over 8,000 developers, boasting on average more than 7 years experience across their recruits. Index supplies talent to industry-leading clients such as Omeo, a German unicorn that's raised almost 500 million USD, Perforce, a US-based leading DevOps solutions provider with over 300 million USD in annual revenue, and many others, some of which are backed by firms such as Goldman Sachs and Y Combinator. So if you're struggling to find the right talent, concerned about high employee costs and staff turnover, Index has the solution for you. Through comprehensive assessments, in-depth interviews, and a robust vetting process, Index can provide your business with the very best international tech talent in less than 7 business days. For contracts greater than 6 months, Index is offering a 10% discount to HQLA fans the next time you hire using their platform. For the next one, Nathan, I'm going to be talking about what I think is the most interesting company that exists today. So this is a company. It's not interesting. It's not interesting because it's listed publicly, right?
Okay.
It's not interesting because of some billionaire founder up there. It's not interesting because of AI research or blockchain technology.
Oh.
I think it's got none of those actually.
Wow.
So the company doesn't really exist to make money or even to make the world a better place, which you might have been thinking, oh, maybe it's a charity, maybe it's an organization. So the company actually just does consumer products, but they're more than just your standard consumer products. It doesn't just sell sort of standard stuff, product lines, stuff that is made to regular people, right?
Okay.
I would call each of the things that they do more projects, and they're more art projects than actual sort of product-based projects, right?
Okay.
So the company, if you haven't guessed yet, it's MSCHF, which is Mischief. You may not have heard of Mischief, but you may have heard of the work that Mischief have done, which is really cool. So their website is like this directory.
Okay.
You can click through to each of the projects that they've done. So for this segment, I've broken it down into 4 categories. So I've broken it down into their 3 most famous projects, their 2 most relevant projects with what we've been talking about recently, my honorable mentions, and 7 quickfire ideas. So what do you think of the website so far?
It's very unusual.
Yep. So it's basically this long list of each of the projects that they've done. I'm going to go through some of their most famous projects first, right?
Okay. Take it
So
away.
the one that I've seen a lot of recently is the BRB, the big red boots. So this is heaps funny. So these are these huge boots that are inspired by the classic Japanese show Astro Boy. So they're these oversized boots that these people have been wearing to, Coachella. They've kind of been around for sort of the last year, I think. And they were $350 originally. And there was this limited run that you could buy through Mischief. You can buy them now on StockX. They were a few listed for about $450, right? So they've built up this hype and they've done this drop and sort of got to that point. The next one, which I think we talked about briefly in a previous episode. So let me know if you remember this one. It was at Art Basel in Miami Beach, and they set up an ATM which displayed everyone's bank balance as a leaderboard.
Oh, yeah.
So if you put in
I
your
do
card,
remember that.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah.
one.
So if your card has the highest balance, you'll go to the top of the leaderboard, right?
That's wild.
So I think if you had, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I think if you really were walking past and you had a huge bank balance, you might not want to show it off for everyone to just come and rob you.
No.
But it was definitely sort of a comment on capitalism. So the joke behind the whole piece was that there's this ostentatious display of wealth in Miami with a lot of Rolexes and rented Lamborghinis and rented jewelry and all that kind of thing. So the artist Diplo had a balance of $3 million in his account and won the leaderboard in December last year, which is pretty funny.
I mean, yeah, it's a funny take because it's like, as you say, like it's basically inferring that like everybody's already doing that anyway. Everyone's already just like competing by demonstrating their bank balance, whether it's true or false. And so, yeah, you're right. It's just like a very matter of fact take on it. Like, well, let's just let people display it as it is. Take away all the frills, you know? Yeah, it's interesting.
So I think this is the next one. I think this is maybe the most interesting project they've come up with. I don't know. I'll let our comments decide. They've come up with this thing called Key for All. So this was a really cool idea. There were 1,000 keys that were sold for $20 each, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a car. It was a PT Cruiser. It was all painted and crazy.
Yeah.
It was the PT Cruiser was the I know it's terrible.
Arguably one of the worst cars in the world.
Exactly. I don't know if that's part of the joke or not, but it was all painted. It was all like just random art. It was like all done as an art piece, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it was all specifically made to be like this big, crazy, ugly thing going around. And basically, what happened was you buy a key for $20. They shipped 1,000 keys out, and then the key fob has a GPS that changes color as you get closer to the car. So the idea was that there's this hotline that you can call at any time to get coordinates, and you use that to get close to the car. Then you use the colors on the key fob to find it, right? And so this is like a take on the sharing economy with a somewhat anti-capitalist move to anti-ownership. Anti-ownership of cars. Everyone's sharing, more of that kind of thing that's going on. And I think there was a service which came out, which is actually like a share car sort of service. So it was kind of like what if there was one car version of that, right? So the idea was that people would drive it around the country, around the US, and they would kind of get a turn to drive it somewhere else and leave it somewhere else. And so it would just kind of be in all these random places.
Yeah, right.
And so, yeah, it was pretty funny. And then different creators would kind of use it and sort of do stuff with it and whatever. And so it's almost like this, it's really cool. It's like a really good way to market. So every one of their ideas is like this insane marketing stunt. And that's basically all the company just exists to do fun marketing stunts for themselves, basically. So
BitFun's the next one.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to my next category, which will be two of the most relevant projects to stuff that we've been talking about, right?
Okay.
So do you remember in the last couple of episodes where we've talked about Hermes?
Mm-hmm, so That's true.
This was your great segments. So this is really funny. They've got a product called the Birkenstock, which is with an I instead of a E. So basically, this is very relevant to the recent examples we've been talking about with basically the Birkin bag. So what it is, it's Birkenstock sandals that are made from a destroyed Birkin bag. And so they would take a Birkin bag and cut it apart and use that to make Birkenstock sandals. So one of the pairs is made from a destroyed Hermes Porosus Birkin 35 bag, which is a $48,000 red leather bag. Well, it's a $48,000 pair of sandals, so I'm not sure how much the bag was. And then there are a few other options for a few other pairs: the Birkin Clements, the Porosus, and the Ostrich. So these are $19,500, $31,000, and $24,000 to buy the pair of Birkenstocks, which is quite funny.
Oh, yeah, I've got it open here now.
Yeah, so Birkenstock with an I dot shoes is how you find that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny. Like, that's such a funny idea. It's like something that you think of where it's like Birkin is like Birkenstock. Oh, that's as a funny joke, we'll just destroy Birkin bags and make them into sandals. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great.
It's very good. And they do it well too. Like, I'm just looking at them here. Like, there's like engraving on the buckles, and like the branding on the side is spot on in a similar way that the actual sandals are. Like, they actually look high quality as well. Like the I think the key here is the execution is actually spot on. It's not just a cool idea.
Yeah. So everything I think that they do it really well. Like, they try and do a really high quality product.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
I'm just looking on the website here, and like it shows the original price of the bag that it was made from and stuff as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So the next product I'm going to be talking about that they've done, the next project, is the Tontine. So a Tontine is an annuity shared by subscribers to a common fund. But when you die, the shares are redistributed among the remaining living members, right?
That's right.
So that's
A bit of
that's how it
a
works.
bit of a Hunger Games vibe.
Exactly. Yeah. So here's how Mischief's version works. So you pay $10 to join the game, right?
Yeah, I can see
And then
that.
every day you have to log in to stay alive, and the last one alive wins the pot.
And it's
So here's how it's been
currently
going.
517 days?
617. So
600.
so it's so the way that it's been going is there's $71,400 in a pool of cash, and there's 437 still living and 6,700 that are dead. So basically, 6,700 people that haven't logged in, have missed a day, something like that.
This is
Then
such
what
an
happens
interesting
is
idea.
Yeah, so what happens is their little grave is around. So if you're on the screen, you're this little ghost person, right? So you can move around with the arrow keys, I think. So give it a go, and you can see if you hover over where there's a grave site, you'll see that there's that person, that user is dead, and it'll tell you the date that they've died. And then you can hover over one of the little people in there, and you'll be able to see, oh, that person's still alive. They're still going. So that person's been like logging in every day and moving around their little person, which is heaps funny.
So I guess everyone had this obviously launched on a particular day, and you had to be on there at that day.
That's generally how their projects work. You have to be there on the exact day.
Yeah, right. We need to follow their socials or something and watch for the next one.
Yeah, it's very cool. So the idea is you get the app, and that's what tells you what the next thing's going to be.
Oh, they have an app.
Yeah, so the app is how it works.
Gotcha.
Those are the two most relevant ones. The other ones were the three most famous ones. This one's my honorable mentions, right? So I don't know if you saw these. There was the Gob Stomper, which is the gumball shoes. So basically, these were really cool. They were these shoes that were designed to be destroyed, right? So as you wear and tear them, they're a white shoe, and as you wear and tear them, they wear away a rubber layer, and the next one down and the next one down is made of different colors. And then we'll show a video or something of someone cutting them open or grinding them down or something. Have a look up the Gob Stomper.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Basically, it's really cool colors inside the shoe, and so as you're skating or something like that, you're shredding the shoes, and it gets cooler and cooler the more layers deep you go. So
yeah, I see, because it kind of gets like a cool pattern happening, like a multicolored pattern where you're wearing it away. Particularly where like people who are skating, they're like when they're doing the kick flips and stuff like that, and they're like rubbing the shoe on the skateboard. It seems that would make a cool effect.
Yeah. So the whole idea is it's like a gob stopper, and so
it's
like the lolly where it's all different colors on the inside
as you go down. Yeah.
That was cool. You wouldn't have remembered this, but a lot of fans of ours would have. Mr. Beast did this app called Finger on the App. So that was made by Mischief, and that was in 2020.
Wow.
That was in June 2020. And so all these, hundreds of thousands of people probably millions of people were on it. And the longer you hold your finger on the app, the more likely you are to beat everyone else. So the last person to take their finger off the app wins $25,000.
Oh my gosh.
And so this was in June 2020, when Mischief was still kind of relatively new. So what ended up happening was there were 4 people still holding their finger on the app after 70 hours, and each won $20,000. So
wow, how do you verify it's an actual person though?
Well, I think it said like move to here. Like you had to like.
Whoa.
There were like stuff that came up throughout it.
Gotcha.
To check and whatever.
Make sure you had to interact with it. Yeah, well, right. Okay, that's crazy.
So
that's
I think
interesting.
But you just had to hold that phone screen. Yeah. So I mean, those are pretty cool. My last category is 7 quick fire ideas. Right. Okay. So these are really cool products from Mischief. So there's everything that they do is really fun. It's like this really cool little thing, and each one isn't specifically a product or whatever. Some of them are apps, some of them are websites, some of them are different things, games, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this one is medical bill art. So people's medical bills were turned into wall art and then sold off to pay the medical debt, which was really interesting. We've got allthestreams.fm. This was a pirate radio for streaming. So you text the number to request a stream, and it comes up on the site. So it'll pirate Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever, and then play it on the website. There's Spot's Rampage. So this is the $74,000 Boston Dynamics robot, but it's fitted with a paintball gun in a white room full of statues and obstacles, right? Mm-hmm. Then here's how it worked. There was a live stream of Spot, and the controls were randomly changed to a different user every 2 minutes. and then you had a go at knocking over objects and walking around and doing whatever you wanted for 2 minutes.
That's
then it
cool.
would change again, and the live stream would keep going.
Yep.
And so if you were paying attention to the live stream, you could get to control it and do whatever because you had the app.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. There's Card v Card. So this is a credit card which was shipped out to thousands of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each card was connected to the same account. So at a random time, money is deposited in, and everyone with that card would have to race to spend it as fast as they could. So you would get to spend money in that account, and yeah, if you were first, you won.
Wow.
I think that's a genius marketing idea. There was Blur, which is a stack of bills that's just blurred out. It's like a stack of US dollars, but it's all blurry. Just a physical product, and
Random.
It was quite funny. There's AlexaGate. So this is a device to put on top of your Alexa to keep it from eavesdropping, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
And then there's the Jesus shoes and the Satan shoes. So these are sneakers filled with holy water in the soles or blood, depending on which one you got. And both are brought out in collaboration with Lil Nas X.
Uh-huh.
So those are their projects, and I think the projects are what's most interesting about the company. So I'm going to talk to them a little bit as a company now. So there's all these really cool ideas, and they're definitely marketing geniuses, right? They've come up with all these really cool little projects, and then they make some money along the way, sort of. But what's great about it is, like, if I made heaps of money from this huge exit, from running this company or something, it's almost exactly what I would do with my time and money. Like, it's just building these fun ideas and products that don't necessarily have to work or make money.
Yeah.
Just one of those kind of cool things that you can do. They describe themselves as an art collective. So they're based in Brooklyn. They were founded in 2016 by their still current CEO, Gabriel Whaley. There isn't much information about them, but they've received $11.5 million in outside funding as of 2019, and they did their first drop in 2018. Since then, they've done 91 drops. So
wow,
91 little
91 really random ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know
Yeah,
how it'd be interesting to understand the creative process there. In how do they continually generate unique ideas? Because that's hard.
I think once you do one idea, you're like, oh, this would be a cool idea. This would be a cool idea. I don't know. I've got like.
You think they basically continue to generate off the back of each other?
I don't know. I think if you're doing something like that creative, sort of, I think you think of more ideas more rapidly as you do more.
Yeah, right.
So
like it puts you in a creative mindset that allows you to think of more creative ideas.
I mean, like every idea, like every time I do a HQLA episode, I have like 10 more ideas that I come up with for segments.
You make a good point.
And so I've got like the next 50 segments in my like notes app, basically. Yeah, but I mean, I think the idea of the company is really cool. So they're not really worried about monetization, is what they said. They just do what they have. They do what they want to do, and they have faith that it'll pay off. So that's kind of the idea. So the team's currently 10 people. Most of them have experience running a marketing agency previously. Apparently, it's a place with not much work-life balance, which is funny because it's like they've also marketed themselves as we get to work and we get to do whatever we want. But it's also a place, I think, where everyone gets there and works really hard for the next drop, and then works really hard for the next drop, and then works really hard for the next drop. So yeah, it's a continuous kind of cycle. So yeah.
But I mean, yeah, that's right. But if you're there doing this stuff, like what even is work? Like if you're just literally having a good time, like what's your alternative? Go home, sit home and watch TV. Like
exactly.
Be in there having a good time with your mates. If that's the vibe.
Yeah, 100%.
It's good. It's inspirational. Like there's like you could do that, but starting on a smaller scale.
For sure.
But it is very interesting. What it does is also highlight the fact that nowadays a lot of emphasis is placed on like efficiency and productivity. But like if you go back and look at like, the Renaissance era, or like if you go back and look at like old buildings or so many things in history, it was done that way just because it looks beautiful, or like, there was craftsmen who that's just what they did. It wasn't necessary. And I think to a certain extent, like I think society's lost that a little bit. And so when you see like companies like what you've mentioned that are literally just doing it for the fun of it or for the creativity or whatever, like I think it's actually really necessary in society to like combat, the opposite, which is pretty prolific nowadays.
For sure. I agree. Yeah, no, I think it's really cool. I think it's just a really good use of time, and I think it's cool to kind of just let whatever creative idea sort of pay off into this really cool product, and then just do it really, really well. And it just comes out beautifully. So yeah, also 91 really good marketing ideas for
Yes.
a business that you could start as well.
You could only imagine that they would have people knocking on their doors asking them to run marketing campaigns for them quite regularly.
For sure.
And probably throwing a lot of money at them. Are you struggling to get your name out there? Do you want to attract more customers? Maybe just increase your revenue? Well, look no further than Newnique. They're an all-in-one marketing agency, and they'll help take your business to the next level. They believe in marketing that should be both effective and enjoyable, and I tend to agree. So they offer a range of services such as web design, branding, social media management, and lead generation. The team of experts, they'll work with you to develop a tailored marketing strategy that fits the unique needs of your business. And they don't just stop at making you look good, but they're specialized in setting up lead generating machines. Their top secret methods will help you capture and convert your leads, leading to increased sales and revenue for your unique business. So search NEW NIQ UE on Google to learn more and schedule a free marketing consultation via their website. So let Newnique take your business to the next level.
Index is a tech-focused recruitment platform passionate about scaling your engineering team, maintaining 95% placement success. To date, they've vetted over 8,000 developers, boasting on average more than 7 years experience across their recruits. Index supplies talent to industry-leading clients such as Omeo, a German unicorn that's raised almost 500 million USD, Perforce, a US-based leading DevOps solutions provider with over 300 million USD in annual revenue, and many others, some of which are backed by firms such as Goldman Sachs and Y Combinator. So if you're struggling to find the right talent, concerned about high employee costs and staff turnover, Index has the solution for you. Through comprehensive assessments, in-depth interviews, and a robust vetting process, Index can provide your business with the very best international tech talent in less than 7 business days. For contracts greater than 6 months, Index is offering a 10% discount to HQLA fans the next time you hire using their platform.
We've seen here in Australia a lot some issues with privacy breaches, okay? To name a few, and there's been several. Medibank is one of the largest, almost 10 million people affected here in Australia relatively recently in the last year. Optus was another big one, big telco here in Australia, around 2 million people affected. And even MyDeal, which is a subsidiary of Woolworths, over 2 million people affected in that instance as well. And so clearly there is an issue with people's private information not being stored in a way that is really that safe. So we've seen this a fair bit in the news, and it seems to be on the minds of both the common person, because it's obviously our information. And so we have an interest in, I guess, securing that. But we also need to function in society, and to do that, we're having to put passwords in, we're having to put dates of birth in, we're having to do this stuff constantly and every day, almost regularly. We're seeing sort of the government response to that has always been a legislation response, and I'm not going to harp on this because this is not supposed to be coming like a law podcast, but I will just mention that the current solution is really to continue legislating in this area. So currently there's the Privacy Act, which is a Commonwealth Act, so it governs the whole of Australia, which makes sense because this stuff crosses boundaries. It's not just state-based. And so basically, this bit of legislation, it was in 1988 that it was enacted, and it just kind of governs and guides the way businesses interact and hold our data and our information. Interesting point just to be made is that small businesses with turnover less than 3 mil actually are exempted from this particular legislation. And it's actually outworked practically through a series of 13 what's called Australian privacy principles. And this is provided for in section 15 of the legislation. So then you look to the principles. I'm not going to go through 13 of them. I'll just give you a sense of them with maybe 3. So basically one of them, for example, is permitting solicited collection of personal information only where reasonably necessary for the legitimate function of a business. Broadly speaking, that makes a lot of sense, but how do you define that? And to be honest, that hasn't really been at issue here. It's more so been like people hacking in and getting the information. It's not necessarily the fact that it's being given out wrongfully in most of these situations. Number 6, for example, is that information must only be used for a purpose for which it was collected. So it's good to know that when you're putting your information in there, the reason that it sort of gives you for needing to collect that, whether it's to create an account or whatever it is, it's collected on the provision that it's used only for that purpose, not to then, and as outlined in the next one, which is number 7, there's a general prohibition against like using that information then to directly market towards those people. And we do, I personally, I think every now and then you do see like dodgy little companies who do that, where you've, and there has to, if there is any direct marketing that does skirt around this, there has to be an opt-out function. So you see that in emails and stuff like that. And so if you're getting emails and there's no unsubscribe, or you're unsubscribing and it's not working, technically they're in breach of with this act, which is interesting. So I think there might be a better Web3 solution to solve
that's
this
what
issue.
we needed.
And so I think, and I feel like maybe we may have mentioned this concept here and there, skirted around it, but I think we need to dive into it head on for a moment here, which is the concept of Soulbound tokens. Do you feel as though we've mentioned it at all? Do you remember it coming up at all?
No, I'm not sure. So you're saying that there's a solution to collecting privacy information, or like there's a solution where they can't be hacked, that database can't be hacked?
Yeah, so we'll go through it, but basically the summary is this solution would no longer require you to put unique and specific information into every database, but instead encapsulate it in one decentralized place and use that token to then verify all of these different derivative platforms that you want to go and use. And so therefore those platforms, they don't have access or purview to that actual information. They simply see the tick that's generally accepted as being verified by XYZ. And we'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics of that. But that's kind of the summary. Does that sort of make sense?
That makes sense. So that's sort of similar to the way that Firebase collects passwords. So Firebase is a commonly used databasing system which people use to generate web apps and iOS apps and all that kind of thing. And what they can do is they can actually store the password without the startup actually seeing what the password is.
Gotcha.
So that's a really interesting thing. But then that's relying on
but Firebase
Google's
themselves
security.
Have it, right? So Firebase.
So Firebase is a Google product.
Is
so
the
it's
weak
relying on Google's security.
Yep. So I think one thing I wanted to do, and just very briefly, is I just wanted to maybe not assume that everybody fully understood what an NFT is, because there may be some, we haven't necessarily talked about it on the podcast for a little while. And so I just wanted to give a very brief summary of what an NFT is, so that then when we move into a Soulbound token, which is a derivative of that, you're not so totally lost in the woods.
What's an NFT, Nathan?
Thank you for asking. So basically, and we'll try and go through this very briefly, but it's an asset that exists and is being turned into like a token that sits on a blockchain network. So let's just break some of those bits down. So basically the blockchain, for example, consists of continuous and open transactions, in that the transactions can be verified by any participant in the network. And they're blocked into little baskets of transactions to make it more efficient. So it's not just a constant stream of transactions, it's a constant stream of blocks. Those, as I said, they can be verified using, like, for example, to make this practical, tools like ETH Explorer, for example. You could go on and you can literally see transactions. You can see which wallet it's come from and where it's going. And so there's an element of openness while still anonymity, which I think is to a certain extent the key that we're going to sort of get to here in the end, which is verification while still being anonymous, meaning that the actual underlying data is not available. Some conversation about the tokens then that are on this network is basically they're distinguished by unique attributes that have been assigned to them. So there's fungible tokens, which is cryptocurrencies, and which basically means that if Isaac has one Bitcoin and I have one Bitcoin, and we both transfer it to each other, it makes no difference. We both still have one Bitcoin. It doesn't matter which Bitcoin it is, if that makes any kind of sense. Whereas non-fungible tokens means they're not interchangeable, is sort of the good word to throw in there, which means that if Isaac and I had two different NFTs and we swapped, we would actually have different NFTs. And, depending on what attributes they had, one or the other may be more valuable, even if the picture or, the the face value of them looked quite similar. And so the fungible tokens are ERC20 standard, and the standards are really just kind of like it's kind of like a pro forma, so that when different tokens and different projects are interacting, they all express the attributes of their tokens in the same way. So the first variable is defined as the same variable across different tokens, if that kind of makes sense. So when transactions are happening, you can see the attributes all lining up together as to what this is and what that is and stuff like that. So it's like a pro forma instead of writing a unique contract every time you were trying to transact with someone. ERC 721 is the standard NFT token, which we have seen. It's starting to be surpassed by ERC 1155, which is to a certain extent a hybrid standard, which allows you to, I guess, have transactions which are both fungible and non-fungible, and it allows you to bundle a number of assets into a single transaction, which is quite helpful when you may have like a large number of tokens all at once that need to be moved around, and you don't have to do them. And then you're talking about gas fees, which is what you're trying to get around in that situation if you were doing individual transactions, which can be quite expensive. There's a couple of other ones that we've never ever talked about that I was looking at. I don't know how new they are. Maybe is this ERC 777 or ERC 777?
I've seen that one.
And from what I can tell, it's very similar to the standard form 721.
I'm feeling like that's a newer one. I don't know.
I think so too, but it seems to add a couple of functions or a couple of features, like a couple of new variables, and one of them seems to be an ability to recover the private key in some manner. So I don't know if that makes it, I don't know, slightly less decentralized. I'm not sure.
It's so funny because that's like it was like initially the point to not be able to recover the private key, because that's like some secret key that you're supposed to have, that's your key to getting into it. So you're supposed to be smart enough to not lose that, right?
That's right.
And then so many millions of people have gone and lost their private keys.
Yes.
That they've brought like a recoverable option out.
That's right.
And it's almost like, no, you're missing the point, you know?
That's right. But it's like also a branding issue for Web3, where it's like all these people now hate it because of their own issues with losing their key. So yeah, you're right. I don't know in practice if people are using this token, but it certainly does exist. And then the only other one which I've certainly never ever heard of is ERC 4626. Which is an interesting one. And I'll just touch on it here. It's a little technical, but basically it's the standard when you're transacting with a yield-bearing vault. So what does that mean? So basically, let's take an example. So DAI, we're aware of DAI as a token. So you could deposit DAI into a yield-bearing platform. We'll talk about what that is in a second. And to represent your stake in that pool that you've just placed your token into, you get VDAI, for example. And that's literally a new token that tracks your stake as people take, and put tokens into it. And it also tracks the interest that's being earned on it. So the yield-bearing vault, for example, what actually happens in that is it's kind of like a pool of assets that then, based on code that's been sent, kind of parameters that have been set by the person who's created the pool, it's maybe their own unique model, is it gets deployed. The assets get deployed around a whole different bunch of different earning derivative platforms behind that. And so it allows you to just kind of set and forget, if that makes sense. You can put it in there, someone's written a model, and it gets deployed as it sees fit. And you get that V token, which represents your stake in it. So that's just a different type of token as well. So just out of interest, if anyone finds that interesting. The only other point is that tokens are initially minted. Minted is obviously the word that's used when it first comes into existence. And that's not new to us. We have a mint for fiat currency from the government. And so that's something that's carried across over into Web3, which is cool. And obviously they can then be exchanged or traded on exchanges or platforms such as OpenSea or Rarible. And then you can hold them either in a cold wallet, which is a little bit complex for someone who's not super Web3 literate. Even myself, I find it a little bit too much of a headache. And I really don't have enough assets to care that much. And so I would prefer just to hold it and play around with it on something like MetaMask, which is, like an extension you can have on your Chrome, for example, that allows you to access different sites and stuff like that. So that's a little bit of an overview of the NFT space. Hopefully people found that interesting and the stuff you can dive into.
That reminds me a lot of charged particles with mango dogwood.
Which is a throwback to a previous project, which was Another Block Studios that we did in combination with Another Block. And that's right. Yeah, that's right. They had nested NFTs where you could earn interest while it was nested inside another NFT. Kind of like do you call them babushka dolls? Is that what they call?
Yeah.
That's kind of the analogy.
Babushka?
Babushka?
I don't know.
Babushka. I'm confident in that. Babushka doll. NFTs for babushka dolls.
Babushka.
So yeah, that's a good point. So basically now what we have is the issue of privacy. We're aware of that. We're aware of the context and the issues we've seen here in Australia. We're aware of maybe what an NFT is to a basic extent. And so let's take the NFT concept a step further to what Soulbound tokens are. So Soulbound tokens were introduced as a concept by Vitalik about a year ago, actually. I think it was in May 2022. So it's still relatively new, and not a lot, to be honest, has sort of happened in the Web3 space in that period. Had he have introduced this a year before that, or maybe a little before, people would have picked it up really quick, and it probably would have escalated quite fast. But we're seeing more limited development in this area now, and so things are moving more slowly.
The old crypto winter.
Well, that's right, exactly right. And so, from my moderate research, there's pretty limited practical application of this because there's a number of big issues or big challenges to overcome. It's more so a conceptual idea, but it's pretty good. And so let's dive into it. So basically, if you want to read the white paper, it's called Decentralized Society, Finding Web3's Soul. That was the paper. It's about 40 pages long. And I said May 2022 it came out. So it lays the foundation for what they term DSOC, which is Decentralized Society. Or maybe you would pronounce it DSOS, but it doesn't really look like DSOS. And so essentially, the overview is that what we're calling an SBT, which is a Soulbound token. Okay, I'm going to refer to it as an SBT. Is like a digital identifier that represents traits, features, and even achievements. And we'll dive into some potential practical uses for this. And they are distributed by souls. Okay, and the soul represents a particular wallet. And once it's been transferred to another soul, it is no longer able to be transferred. So this is unique in that. And one good take on it that I read was, let's talk about, for example, a DAO at the moment, right? Again, haven't seen a lot of action in this space recently, but we have in the past seen DAOs formed to do interesting things. And arguably, one of the issues that could be at stake with a DAO is that anyone who's quote unquote rich can just go in, buy up majority stake in it, and then make decisions. And that's contingent on being able to buy them and things like that. But technically speaking, it's possible. Whereas in this situation, if instead organizations were governed by SBTs, that would mean that once you're handed an SBT for your involvement in the program, you can't on-sell that, which means that the people who hold them, or the number that are held by each person, are a direct reflection of their engagement with the project as opposed to their financial ability to just purchase them, if that makes sense. And so that's a little interesting, unique take on how it could help governance, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, that is a cool way to look at it, because typically you look at a company structure and the person that can come in and buy the largest portion of the company gets to run it, whereas sometimes they're not the biggest contributor. So
yeah, that's right. And so it's interesting. In regards to a few use cases, then we'll talk about another issue that it solves, which is the key, which we've talked about previously. Because let me bring that up in a minute. But basically, ideal world, right, is that the government gets on board with this idea and hands out a one-of-one. The key is it has to be a one-of-one, identifier, SBT identifier, to every person that identifies them as being that person and having a number of attributes, as I mentioned. And then you can use that to then simply just verify that you're a real person on a whole bunch of different platforms. A few other interesting takes on it before we dive into the recovery issue, because obviously, if we're saying that the key to this functioning is the rarity or the scarcity of those SBTs, be it that there's only one available, because if they could continuously be handed out, then people can hack the system and just keep saying, oh, I've lost it. You just keep getting new ones. Then you've got multiple identities of the same person. That's a big issue. So the key here is only allowing one SBT per, authorization or verification or whatever you're doing. But the issue with that is then if it's lost, that's your identity effectively lost forever.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And so we'll talk about that in a minute. A few other interesting use cases is centralized exchange verification. So Binance, for example, centralized crypto exchange, they do have a token called BAB token, and it's used to verify that the particular holder has already undergone their KYC, know your customer, Binance process. And so instead of having to then do another KYC on some derivative alternative platform, Binance can provide that verification, and you're not then having to provide those details to another person, scan your, I don't know whether it's like your ID and things like that, which are actually quite sensitive. Another one which is quite obvious, I think, when you first start thinking about this is career and education. So, for example, education providers, so universities could be sols in that they're able to hand out SBTs, and you could get handed an SBT which represents, an undergrad degree or, I don't know, like a graduate certificate or something like that. And then you can basically use these to verify education when you're doing job applications. Another interesting one is LinkedIn. And I always thought this was a bit of a flaw to the system where technically there's, I know I've looked it up a fair bit because I run a small organization, like a small society here at the university that I'm at. And there's a few people who have still on their profile their previous positions in our association. And I wanted to see if there's anything that the association can do to enforce their removal of that position, if that makes sense, because they're no longer in that position. They're off. And it's actually, from what I can tell, it's actually not possible, other than literally emailing people at LinkedIn to try and ask them to do it. There's no function that allows you to do that, which I think is an issue. Because then what that means is basically people can put a whole bunch of untrue things on their LinkedIn about previous experience.
Yeah.
And the onus
Harvard
is
Business School.
Harvard Business School, whatever. And what are we doing? What an employer going to call up Harvard, trying to get them to go through all of their previous 500,000 students and try and find if this student was ever a student there? Unlikely they're going to do that. And so I think I don't know if people are actually doing this, but it seems to be a potential issue if people aren't already doing it. So this obviously solves that in that you can only, you've got to use an SBT which has come from that Sol, be it Harvard, for example, and that actually verifies that you actually got it from there. So it's a cool solution to that, to the LinkedIn problem. Other ones is health, obviously, vaccinations, pretty relevant thing we've seen recently. How do you prove that? You just use an SBT, makes a lot of sense. I talked about social governments. And another interesting point here is unsocial digital behavior. So we've seen both in the metaverse, there's, videos of people going in and, I don't know, smashing people's, I don't know, going into fake shopping centers and just smashing all the shopping trolleys everywhere. And which is fun. I get it. But if we're as a society, no. If as a society we're supposed to be taking this a little more seriously, then that's going to be an issue. We're even on, on blogs and on chat forums, there's people who are the anonymity allows them to just go and say whatever they want, things that are really not appropriate and you wouldn't say in everyday life. So SBT, again, could come into play here. You need to verify your identity in some way using an SBT to get onto these platforms, for example. Again, this is all decentralized. And then you can get in, and then there could be a voting system whereby people can get certain SBT holders could get voted off the platform, and that SBT or a wallet that holds that SBT could never use that platform ever again and be banned. So basically, you could ban people without even knowing who they are. And so I think that's a really interesting use case, remembering that they can't be transferred. So you'd have to set up a whole nother wallet, which is possible, but it's certainly a barrier to people going about this behavior. So I think that's an interesting use case. I think probably one of the final things to discuss is the looming issue of with wallet recovery here. So if you're then creating a wallet which is you, it's your identity. What happens if you lose this key that we've been discussing? And we've seen it, we've seen it happen with large chunks of crypto and stuff like that. And it's there's some pretty devastating and somewhat humorous stories out there of people. I think there's a guy who like bought a garbage dump or something to try and find his $20 million worth of Bitcoin or something, like just things like that. And so there's two solutions that that Vitalik have outlined in this white paper. The first one is noted as a not great solution, but still noted is social recovery, which is obviously, just in case anyone really didn't pick that up, the current method of recovering or accessing your decentralized wallet, that is a wallet that's not actually held by another company like a Binance or something who's helping you use it, is a seed phrase. Seed phrase is usually how many? Do you remember how many words it generally is? It's a lot of words.
24.
Yeah, I thought it was in the 20s. So circa 24 words, which is a lot of words. That's not a sentence. They're just random words. And the onus is on you to then save that somewhere. And so that's the current solution, decentralized solution. The first method is called social recovery. So instead, the user or the wallet holder can curate a list of what's called guardians, who and give them power to effectively change the wallet key if they're all in unanimous agreement to do so. Now, the issue here is obviously good security would require a high number of guardians. If it was just one person, then it's arguably it's a very simple solution, but it's not a very secure solution. So arguably, it needs to be a high volume of guardians and also quite a diverse range of guardians, ideally, not a whole bunch of guardians who are all in your World of Warcraft team or something, of which you all offend on one particular occasion and all decide to change your key, for example. So
right, yeah.
it needs to be a diverse group of people and a large number of people. And the issue is obviously that guardians can pass away. So imagine if it's unanimous, it needs to be unanimous and someone dies. And so then you then have to go and find the key or change the key for their account. And then you're going down a rabbit warren here. Obviously, relationships sour, as I inferred there previously. And so that's going to be an issue as well. If some person refuses or won't communicate with you anymore, again, it's effectively lost. So there's some issues. Obviously, and then, because of that, it may require regular maintenance of that list, updating it, changing it, depending on your relationships. Not a bad idea, but maybe not foolproof. The better idea that Vitalik suggests is what's called community recovery, which is not a curated list that you control, but instead it draws upon some of the most significant and real-time community relationships that are relevant to your SBT holdings in your wallet, if that makes sense. So you get an SBT from Harvard or something. Maybe Harvard's not a great example, but an SBT from your local university or from some other organization or from a community group you're a part of, etc. These are all souls that can then make up your community of recovery guardians, of which you're not defining, but are just defined by what you hold in your soul. And then basically the owner of the soul can request, and consent must be provided by all of these holders. Now, the key to, and what it assumes in this situation, is that what they call off-chain communications can occur to authenticate the owner's request. So basically what that means is if Isaac is one of the sole holders of an SBT that has been transferred to me, I will request, he'll see the request on whatever this system actually looks like one day, and it requires me to verify in some way that he feels satisfied that I am the person who owns it, and I am actually requesting that we change the key. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Obviously, it makes no sense if you can't do that. If I can't access you outside of that request, then it's just a random request from some random wallet. And so I need to create some sort of verification off chain for that to really work well. So yeah, it's interesting. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, that's cool. I think that there's a lot of thought that goes behind verifications and kind of identity management in blockchain. And I think some problems don't need as much solving as you think. So I think like some solutions are kind of over engineered regarding community verification and things like that. I think there's already a lot of these things sort of in the real world, power of attorney to act over a will. This person is, it's like a principal agent problem as well. Like this person's acting on behalf of me. And so I think that there are a lot of real world solutions. And I think it probably could become more of an issue in the future, because as we're seeing more sort of AI stuff come up, people could very quickly duplicate identity details and try and you can also generate voice and everything like that now. So I think a lot more people could kind of call using your voice based on, like recordings on the phone or whatever, regenerate your voice, talk to the bank, and then kind of recover your passwords from there. So I think there's definitely a lot of value in sort of privacy and security stuff.
The security is only as secure as the weakest link, and your point there is good, which is if the weakest link is that you still have to call the person to verify yourself, and that can be done now through AI, through voice cloning, then yeah, you're right. Is it really that secure?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the idea of, I liked the most probably the idea of a jury of people that maybe, and then maybe you make the decision 66% as opposed to unanimous. Then a few people die or change between, last year when you looked at it. Maybe that's the best solution. I don't know. Yeah.
Special resolution, 75%. I think. I think that's probably a good solution as well. I think. The only other thing to be said, and this is just the last point, is revocation. So there is some discussion in the paper, and again, this is all I think relatively theoretical, but there is some discussion around the owner of the Sol, who originally distributed the SBT, having a function that allows them to revoke the transfer of that SBT to the second to the owner, to the recipient is the better word, and that sort of could change a few different things in regards to, for example, people's ownership in like the DAO situation that we talked about. If someone, if people fall out, or maybe that's a bad example, but if someone starts to become unaligned, or a group of people are unaligned with the majority, then there could be a function that revokes their stake in that particular DAO. There's potentially some ethical, moral issues with being able to do that. Generally speaking, the majority rules, or the 75% on special resolution stuff that we see in day-to-day world in membership in a company, seems to be a relatively fair solution. Revoking people's rights due to misalignment could be an issue. I think it could lead to some bigger issues, but it seems to be a function that is being discussed as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, that's it. So the summary and where the context for this maybe is that I've been on a sort of a little mini training course for 3 weeks, one night a week with a law firm here in where am I? Melbourne. And they're a big firm here in Australia, and they have been discussing a few different topics: AI, metaverse, NFTs, from a legal context. And there's been some conversation around Soulbound tokens. Not a lot of their staff. One of their key staff members, who is responsible for the region for tech, brought it up as being a really interesting solution. And I do agree that it's probably something it's a little known thing that's not talked about as much, because it inherently sits outside of the hype train, because it's not something you can speculate on, because it's not possible to flip it. And so it gets no airtime. But it maybe one day is one of the things that comes out of NFTs that is actually of utility to society.
Yeah, interesting.
Are you struggling to get your name out there? Do you want to attract more customers? Maybe just increase your revenue? Well, look no further than Newnique. They're an all-in-one marketing agency, and they'll help take your business to the next level. They believe in marketing that should be both effective and enjoyable, and I tend to agree. So they offer a range of services such as web design, branding, social media management, and lead generation. The team of experts, they'll work with you to develop a tailored marketing strategy that fits the unique needs of your business. And they don't just stop at making you look good, but they're specialized in setting up lead generating machines. Their top secret methods will help you capture and convert your leads, leading to increased sales and revenue for your unique business. So search NEW NIQ UE on Google to learn more and schedule a free marketing consultation via their website. So let Newnique take your business to the next level.
Index is a tech-focused recruitment platform passionate about scaling your engineering team, maintaining 95% placement success. To date, they've vetted over 8,000 developers, boasting on average more than 7 years experience across their recruits. Index supplies talent to industry-leading clients such as Omeo, a German unicorn that's raised almost 500 million USD, Perforce, a US-based leading DevOps solutions provider with over 300 million USD in annual revenue, and many others, some of which are backed by firms such as Goldman Sachs and Y Combinator. So if you're struggling to find the right talent, concerned about high employee costs and staff turnover, Index has the solution for you. Through comprehensive assessments, in-depth interviews, and a robust vetting process, Index can provide your business with the very best international tech talent in less than 7 business days. For contracts greater than 6 months, Index is offering a 10% discount to HQLA fans the next time you hire using their platform. My next segment is about a guy that is completely whack, right? So have you heard of Bryan Johnson?
Yes.
And I don't mean the lead singer of AC/DC either.
I didn't know that's what his name was. Bryan Johnson.
Okay.
Bryan, isn't he the CEO of one of the exchanges?
No,
that's Bryan something else. That's Bryan Armstrong.
That is Bryan Armstrong. That's right. He's CEO of Coinbase. So,
Sorry.
okay. So
I don't think I do.
I'll talk about this guy.
I don't think I do.
Yeah, cool. All right. So I'll talk about this guy from what he's trying to do first. Then I'll kind of maybe explain a little more around who he is. He's famous for trying to, and by famous, I mean he's lightly famous for trying to reverse the aging process. So he has this team of more than 30 medical professionals who are working hard to keep him aging at a slower rate, right?
Him.
So yeah, so he's doing it on himself. He's doing the whole experiment on himself. So the project is called Blueprint, and it's all about spending any and all resources to stay the same biological age while his chronological age is increasing, right? So he's currently 45 and he's trying to stay 18, right?
Right.
And so basically he's been doing this for the last couple of years. So Johnson claims that he's aging slower than a 10-year-old at the moment. So this is down to his pretty crazy routine. So he eats exactly 1,970 calories every day. He does daily testing. He does a precise exercise routine. All of that starts at exactly 4:30 every day. He's been doing life this way for 2 years now, and he's vlogging every day as well. So he's got a YouTube channel. And basically he goes to bed exactly the same time every day as well. He eats three meals a day, and some of them just look like slop, right? And he eats all of them before 11 a.m. He's got a strict vegan diet.
Vegan.
And along with these, he has 30 supplements a day.
Oh my gosh.
He's got a temperature-controlled room with a heat-moderating mattress. And one of the craziest parts of his routine, and I almost brought this up in the previous episode that we shot, is that he uses his son as a blood boy. So he does blood transfusions from his 17-year-old son to try and keep himself from aging.
That seems like gross to me. I don't know why.
Oh, it's very gross.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane. So I don't know if he does it regularly. It's something I did watch a video of that he made of his 17-year-old son and him doing a transfusion, which is very interesting. So in terms of testing, Bryan does organ measurement tests, blood tests, breathing observations, and skin damage scans. I think every day. And what you might be wondering is, how does he afford this lifestyle?
I was literally thinking, how does such an insane person have the means to do something like this?
Exactly. Okay, so we now know what he's doing, but this routine is costing him $2 million a year, right? So how does he afford it? So Bryan's actually a multi-time founder. I'll start with his first company. So he founded a company called Braintree in 2007,
okay,
which you might not have heard of, but you would have heard of the company that he acquired. So this was a company that specialized in mobile and web payments for e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And this company acquired Venmo in 2012 for $26 million. And then that company, Braintree, which owned Venmo, was later acquired in 2013, the next year, by PayPal for
Yeah.
$800 million.
That's crazy.
So that's a pretty cool founding story. That's just his first company. The second company he started was a VC firm. So this was called OS Fund, and he started this in 2014, the next year after selling to PayPal. It was backed by his own $100 million of personal capital. And it's a fund specifically for investing in ideas that relate to artificial intelligence and machine learning in the areas of synthetic biology, nanotechnology, and genomics.
Okay.
So
cool.
Pretty interesting.
Very interesting.
Pretty interesting fund.
For sure.
And then 2 years later, in 2016, Bryan founded his third company. So this was called Kernel, and with a K, so KERNEL. And he funded that with $100 million of his own money. And then this is a company that makes helmets that study brain activity. So he invested a further $53 million personally, and then he raised $54 million of outside investment as well. So about a $200 million company in terms of funding. And in 2020, they had a actual demo product of the helmet. It's interesting. I don't know if it actually has a working product yet, or if he just built a company to scan his own brain. I don't know, but
or it's just that situation. What was that EV company where they just pushed the truck down the hill?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, could just be a
company was
standard
that?
MRI machine. It was
Yeah, what's it called?
Nikola.
Nikola, yes.
Yeah, it was Nikola.
Nikola
Yeah,
truck
they just rolled.
getting pushed down the hill. So funny. What a funny
Yeah, I was
one.
thinking it's not Tesla. It was trying to be the same thing as Tesla though. Yeah.
Yep. It's so funny.
Yep. So what inspired this lifestyle, right? It was overeating. And he, being insane, actually he considers overeating as self-harm. So he was saying that in this interview, he was self-harming every day. And I was like, whoa, that's very insane. But he was actually just overeating. So he was a father of 3, startup founder.
So
and so there was a lot of external pressures, and he would overeat from 7 to 10 p.m. every day is what he said, every night. And so he considered this as self-harm, and so he had to fire Evening Bryan from making decisions, and like kind of make the decisions early up about what he would kind of do. And so you can see that he eats all 3 meals before 11 a.m. So he must be he's well and truly fired Evening Bryan.
Wait, I didn't hear that bit. He eats all his meals before 11 a.m.
Yeah, so he eats all 3 meals for the day before 11 a.m.
That is so weird.
Yeah.
What?
As if that's the weirdest part.
I don't know. Yeah, that's not the weirdest part, but I don't know. That hits me different.
Yeah, it is strange.
Because I don't eat anything before 11 a.m. So it just feels weird to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it still counts as intermittent fasting.
For sure. It definitely
the other way around.
And and there is an argument to it, because it means that you're actually burning the calories before you lay down for 8 hours, as opposed to eating big calories 2 hours before you do that. So, I mean, I get it. It's just very unorthodox.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, but anyway, he's well and truly fired Evening Bryan there.
Okay, yes.
So here are the claims that he's got from the effects of Blueprint, right? So his body inflammation levels are 66% below the average 10-year-old. So that's how well the body's immune system responds to irritants.
Inflammation. Can we talk about inflammation for a second, or do you want to keep going?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
so I just have an anecdote here. So this is so random, but I think it is related. I promise. I sold a monitor screen to on Marketplace, and the guy who came and picked it up was an osteopath.
Right.
Do you know what osteopaths do?
They're like a chiropractor, but more fake.
Very controversial. So he said, do you know what the word is so weird. Osteopathy. Do you know what osteopathy is? And I said, no, I suppose I don't really. I probably had a similar response to you. Like, chiropractor is kind of similar, right? You know, you just like touch things and do things and it's fun. And he goes, oh, let me show you. And I was like, oh, okay.
He's funny.
And so he's really intense guy. And he comes into the house and he wanted to see it work. So he like plugged his laptop in, whatever, got the screen going. Yeah, okay, it works. Okay, you can take it. But he just kept on going. Like, he was like so passionate about it. He's telling me about like his boss that he works for is like been published in all these things. And I was like, oh, so you like a doctor? He's like, oh, yeah, you know, like we have our own body. It's not the Medical Association of Australia. It's like our own governing body. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I'm like, oh, let's have this conversation outside. Yeah. And so we like go outside and like get him to his car, and he's like puts his thing in the car, and I'm like, sweet, okay, we're good. And he turns back around. He's like, oh, so let me tell you a bit more about this, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, I don't really, like I said, listen, I've never really been to an osteopath. Like I don't even go to the dentist, to be honest. And so, he goes, oh, do you want me to show you? And I was like, you know what? You only get one life. Yeah, sure. And this might significantly reduce it, but let's do it. And so we're standing in the middle, almost in the middle of the street, like behind his car on the street. And he goes, all right, turn around. So I turned around. He goes, put your arms out. So I got my arms out like this. And people are driving past. And and he goes, and he pushes on like the middle of my back, just with his finger, like nothing intense, just with his finger. And he goes, oh, you've got, you're a bit tight in your chest, aren't you? And I was like, oh, maybe. I'm not sure. And he goes, oh, let me get, and he pulls my arm back like this. He goes, oh yeah, I can really feel it. Can really feel it. It comes from something in your fingers here. It's tight in your chest. He goes, oh, listen, I was dealing with a pro athlete the other day, and the doctor couldn't do anything about this issue that he had in his brain. Had this intense migraine, and he goes, so I bent down in front of him, and I just touched his groin. And I could just tell that that's it. The inflammation was coming from the line of inflammation was coming from his. and so then he did something, and and then he said it
did something, eh?
Yeah, and he said that the crux of it is inflammation. He said every issue that people have with their bodies is derived from an issue
from the
with inflammation. And so his solution, this osteopath solution, is they just apply pressure to a certain part of the body, which is usually nowhere near the symptomatic issue, the symptomatic part of the body, and it apparently flushes out the inflammation.
Yeah, and then he left, didn't pay you. He was like, no, I've given you enough. I've given you this value. Now I'm taking your monitor.
So yeah, very strange situation.
You were paid in services.
I was, yeah, that's right.
So body inflammation levels, 66% below that of a 10-year-old. He had an 80% reduction in grey hair, which I don't know how you tell other than looking at pictures of your dad. I don't know. But maybe
wait, is that saying that it's gone back to being not grey?
I'm not sure. Well,
or has it all fallen out?
I assumed that, and
therefore he doesn't have much grey hair.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's gone back to not being grey, but I would have assumed that it's like
80% less than the expected amount of grey hair.
Yeah, because he's 45. If you've seen his hair, it's like jet black as well, so it looks like he dyes it anyway. But
he does. That's an easier solution, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe that's part of it.
Eating 3 meals before 11, just dye your hair.
Yeah. He has maybe it's part of the thing. He has identified and corrected a ticking time bomb without any need for surgical procedures, which is interesting. So this was a bilateral internal jugular vein stenosis, which is IJV. So this is where there's a problem with blood flow around the head and neck flowing to the brain, the blood. So he's managed to correct that issue by identifying it with, obviously he's got 30 medical professionals around, so they probably just scan him like crazy and tell him what to do. He has a perfect liver fat ratio.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure what that ratio is, but
who knows?
Interesting. He has a fitness level of an 18-year-old. And for every 365 days, he ages 277 days. So that's the
which
chronological versus
in that
the biological aging.
He's going backwards quite slowly though.
Well, he's not going backwards. He's just aging slower than he would be otherwise.
I see what you're
saying. The chronology,
Well, but didn't you say that did you say that he's trying to become an 18-year-old though?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how the calculation works. But I know that he's trying to, I mean, I guess he has the fitness level of an 18-year-old.
Got you. So at some point he went backwards and then now he's progressing forwards from 18 at a lesser rate than the actual time itself?
Yeah, because I'm not sure what his biological age is. I believed
Didn't you say
that
it was
when he
40
was
something?
he is 45,
Yeah.
but I don't know what his like supposed biological age is.
Right.
Like going back, like because his like actual chronological age is 45.
Yes.
But yeah, I think the idea was that he's going back to 18 and then going forward from there. So maybe he's already back at 18. I don't know.
Who makes
Maybe
that
he's
decision
19
that
now.
he is? Maybe he's just
Well,
decided he is. I mean,
yeah, maybe he decided. Yeah, well, he's the one that's doing the work. So
yeah.
he can have
It's
it.
his project.
Yeah, exactly. So with this insane routine, it would be pretty easy to guess that he has a pretty insane personal life as well, right? Next up, I'm going to talk about his fiance or his former fiance, right?
Oh.
The man's so strict on the routine, I think he's turned himself into an actual robot, right?
Yeah.
So in 2021, his former fiance filed a lawsuit against him.
Mm-hmm.
And so the basis of this, so they were together since 2018.
Yep.
And then she's been there and helped him build the brand, build, companies. The whole idea is that she's like the supporting act. She's trying to kind of come in as the wife figure.
Yeah.
I think she's trying to sort of, shoehorn in there. So she's suing him for damages and emotional distress, and for the emotional distress and financial losses. So his fiance was a TV actress named Taryn Southern, and
Taryn Southern.
Oh, classic. Yeah, no, not as well known. I didn't know who she was. But what happened to cause the breakup? Well, she got breast cancer, which means that Johnson is alleged to have told Southern she's become a net negative and a bad deal for him. So that's what the lawsuit states.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty crazy, right? So before this, he had promised lifelong financial support, verbally, which is, I think, what the lawsuit's based on, because it's kind of like, of course he said that, like, if they're like dating or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, of course I'll support you forever,
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, I don't know if that counts as a contract.
Well, there is some interesting case law around, or there's a specific treatment between like de facto partners in if a promise, like, because the courts don't like to get in what they quote unquote like marriage and partnership is like a sacred thing, and so the courts are very hesitant to get in the middle of any promise or arrangement that's between couples, and so it's usually pretty unlikely that particularly an oral agreement, which would be assumed to be non-legal, would be upheld by the court. Is probably my quick take on that.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I'll go into the more specific wording, but when they were together, he required her to only message him on the app Signal, where he could remove trails of communications. He could set certain messages to disappear, and he also had a number of burner phones that he'd carry around with him, which is
wow,
very very weird.
Yeah.
And as part of the couple's separation, the lawsuit alleges that Johnson breached an express, oral, or implied agreement whereby he would pay $149,000 toward her living and moving expenses in exchange for Miss Southern's promise to start looking for a new place to live as soon as possible. So, yeah, it's a very interesting sort of premise. He's a very interesting dude. He's definitely very crazy.
Yes, that's pretty apparent.
That's my key takeaway. He's definitely kind of optimized his life for his health thing, and so that even is shown in relationships there. So yeah,
interesting.
It's also got like really is like skin looks like it's like covered in liquid, and like his hair is like.
Well, yeah, I was looking at him here on Google. In my mind, it's a bit of a Michael Jackson situation.
Yeah.
Where he sort of made all of these modifications, and it's arguably not really benefited the the overall outcome.
My take is, I think in life you have to kind of, there's no point to longevity if you're not enjoying yourself. So,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
live forever and suffer the whole time. What's the point? Are you really living?
Exactly. Yeah. So my point is to live pretty well, try and live a long life, try and live a good life. That's my advice to the listeners. Yeah.
I mean, it's good. It's good advice. I like it.
Well, this has been HQLA episode 33. And on this episode, we've brought it back to the blockchain. We've had a very fungible time. We've been talking about businesses that do need to make money. We've been talking about the Kardashians. We've been keeping up with them. We've been talking about businesses that don't need to make money. Some of the best marketing ideas I've ever seen, and reversing the aging process while losing the ones you love.
Yep.
This has been HQLA episode 33. Thanks for tuning in. We are proudly brought to you by Index and Newnique.
That's true. Thank you very much.